Alright, let's dive into something that's been making waves in the energy world. And no, I'm not talking about wind turbines, though they're kind of at the center of this. Here's the deal. The US government just paid a whopping $1.2 billion to RWE, a German energy giant, to essentially scrap their offshore wind projects. Yes, you heard that right. Instead of pushing forward with renewable energy, RWE is now funneling that money into conventional gas projects, including a massive LNG terminal in Louisiana. So what's the bigger picture here? Let's break it down. First off, what makes this really interesting is the timing and the politics behind it. This deal comes straight from the Trump administration, which has been pretty vocal about its preference for fossil fuels over renewables. Remember when Trump called wind turbines big, ugly windmills and claimed they were dangerous to wildlife? Well, this move feels like a direct extension of that mindset. Personally, I think this raises a deeper question. Is this a strategic shift in energy policy, or just a political statement? Because let's be real, $1.2 billion is a lot of money to pay just to halt progress in renewables. Now let's talk about RWE's side of the story. They're not just walking away from these projects, they're reinvesting that payout into gas. Specifically, $900 million is going into an LNG export terminal. From my perspective, this feels like a calculated move. RWE is playing the long game, betting on the continued demand for natural gas, especially in a global market that's still heavily reliant on it. But here's the thing, what many people don't realize is that LNG is often framed as a cleaner fossil fuel, but the infrastructure required to produce and transport it can be just as problematic as coal or oil. So, is this really a step forward or just a lateral move? One thing that immediately stands out is the scale of RWE's overall investment plans. They're pouring 17 billion euros into the US over the next 6 years to grow their generation capacity. That's a massive commitment, but it's also a bit of a mixed message. On one hand, they're abandoning wind projects. On the other, they're doubling down on gas. What this really suggests is that the energy transition isn't as straightforward as we'd like to think. Companies are hedging their bets, and governments are often pulling the strings in ways that don't always align with long-term sustainability goals. Now let's zoom out for a second. This isn't an isolated incident. Earlier this year, the Trump administration struck a similar deal with Total Energies, and just last month, they signed a $129 billion agreement with Duke Energy to terminate offshore wind leases. If you take a step back and think about it, there's a clear pattern here. The administration is systematically dismantling offshore wind projects in favor of fossil fuels. But why? Is it just about energy security, as Interior Secretary Doug Burgum claims? Or is there something else at play? In my opinion, this feels like a pushback against the broader shift toward renewables, driven by political ideology rather than practical energy policy. A detail I find fascinating is Burgum's statement that Americans deserve an energy system built on common sense and not costly subsidies. But here's the irony. Fossil fuels have been subsidized for decades, often at the expense of renewables. So when he says this deal strengthens energy security, I can't help but wonder, at what cost? And to whose benefit? It's easy to frame this as a win for energy independence, but what about the environmental and economic implications down the line? Finally, let's talk about the implications for the future. This deal isn't just about RWE or even the US. It's part of a bigger trend. Globally, the transition to renewable energy is facing pushback from various quarters, whether it's political resistance, economic challenges, or technological hurdles. What this really suggests is that the path to a sustainable energy future is going to be messy and complicated. Personally, I think we need to have more nuanced conversations about these trade-offs. It's not just about renewables versus fossil fuels. It's about balancing short-term needs with long-term goals. So here's my closing thought. Is this $1.2 billion deal a step backward, or just a detour on the road to a greener future? I don't have all the answers, but one thing's for sure. This move has sparked a conversation that's long overdue. What do you think? Is this the right direction for energy policy, or are we missing the bigger picture? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world.